the municipality, the local authority cannot demolish all the houses at once because it will draw far too much attention, far too much attention from the international community. So they have a process of randomisation where there's just a list of the houses that are slated for demolition, and they will randomly go around and demolish the houses. So they happen as individuals, they happen singularly. Now, I'm going to walk you through the process of housing demolition. I am a young Palestinian woman. I've got 3 kids, and we've just built a new house. We've done it without a permit because we couldn't get a permit. We tried, we refused again and again a permit. So we built anyway. And now there are a few options for what happens after that. The civil administration, or the civil administration would be in Area C, Jerusalem municipality will be in Jerusalem, will give a housing demolition order to the house. Now, they could either pitch up at the house, knock on the door, no one's at home, and they'll go and stick it under a stone, or stick it to a post that's near to the house. Or if the little toddler kid who opens the door, 6-year-old kid who opens the door, they'll give him the housing demolition order. Now that bit of paper that was put under a stone and stuck to a post, in the wind, in the rain, in the sun, and whatever, just disappears. And they don't have the housing demolition order in their hand, which means they cannot try and fight it in the courts. Now, let's say they see the housing demolition order itself. It doesn't have a date on it. It doesn't say, on this day and time, we're going to come and demolish your home. They're just given the housing demolition order, and it could happen 10 days later, it could happen 10 weeks later, it could happen 10 months later, it could even happen 10 years later. So, from the moment that you have the housing demolition order in your hand to the day of the demolition order itself, you are waking up every morning to check to see if there are bulldozers outside your house. We have testimonies from women who say that they woke up in the morning and before they even brushed their teeth, they will go and see if there are bulldozers outside their house. They are living in a state of fear, in a state of terror. That state's terrorism. That is the state, the body of the government, the country or the municipality causing a population to live in a state of terror. Now, the day of the demolition comes. It could happen either in the afternoon, around noon, when they know the men are at work and there are only women and children in the house, or it'll happen at 3 o'clock in the morning when they know the family are half asleep and they won't be orientated and there'll be less of a chance that they will resist the housing demolition itself. However, the civil administration or the municipality will always pitch up with a security contingent, and every time, without fail, when the family resists, they will use tear gas and stun grenades in the house to get them out. A private company is on hand at that point to then take all the belongings from the house out of the house. Another private company is then on hand to do the actual demolition itself. At the end of the demolition, the Palestinian family are handed a bill for the demolition. If they don't pay for it, they're fined. If again and again they don't pay that fine, the father, the husband is then put in prison for not paying. Now, the reason that we see this is it hasn't been cleared up. This demolition hasn't been cleared up. The Palestinian man who built this, it was an apartment block built for young Palestinians, and there was no one living here when it was demolished. They had yet to move into the apartments. It was demolished before it was completely finished. But before the demolition, the Palestinian owner of the apartment block registered the building as a business and then claimed bankruptcy. And so that's why we still see it staying, because there's no one to pay for the cleanup. Now, one of the bus drivers I had for one of the tours about 8 months ago, he actually owns this part of the land. And he said to me that every month he gets a bill from the municipality about the cleanup. He said they've asked him to pay about 30,000 shekels for the cleanup, and he's like, why should I pay it? He's refusing to pay it. Now, just an interesting side note, something I discovered not that long ago. This amazing activist, about 70, 80 years old, in the UK, who came over from Germany on the kinder transport to the UK. So she was involved with a there was a group of gypsy families in the United Kingdom called Dale Farm. It's about 100 families, quite a lot of people, who were being evicted from their land. And exactly the same tactic that they used in the United Kingdom is used here. They were fined £2 million for the eviction itself. They had to pay for their own eviction to happen. And so when I heard that, I was like, this is incredible. The same tactics are being used again and again in different struggles, in different scenarios, in different places. And I always think it's important to sometimes take a step back and look at the global picture, look at the bigger picture, see, because it's the same way that the disastrous effects of capitalism repeat themselves across the world. It's not just a matter of which country, but the same tactics are used, the way the state controls the population, the same tactics are used. Which I think is it's just an interesting point to make. Now, the last time there was mass demolitions planned for Jerusalem was in Silwan. About 50 houses, altogether about 1,000 people were going to be affected by this demolition. 50 houses slated for demolition. Because of the pressure from the international community, that didn't happen. Those housing demolitions didn't happen because 50 is a big number. 50 is a lot. What I was saying earlier, Israel can't mass demolish because it draws too much attention from the international community. So they go and demolish individual houses. Now, there are three types of housing demolition: administrative, military, and punitive and military. So I'm going to give you examples. Administrative, which makes up the majority of housing demolitions, is basically not having a permit, and that's most housing demolitions are under that title of being administrative demolitions, whereas the person doesn't have a permit. Punitive demolitions, in 2002 the Israeli army decided they were no longer going to use housing demolitions as a way of punishing the population. But it was a tactic. Up until 2005, they would punish Palestinian families by demolishing their homes. During the Second Intifada, it was used an awful lot, especially in Jericho. There is a testimony in here from a bulldozer driver talking about his experience demolishing the homes from not a very nice point of view. And so this punishment of using housing demolition as a way of punishment is something that was quite popular. In 2005 they said we're not going to do it anymore. However, I don't know if you guys know, but about a year ago there was quite a famous hunger striker, a Palestinian political prisoner, Samir, who was on a hunger strike, and his brother lives in East Jerusalem, and they demolished his home as a way to put pressure on him to end his hunger strike. They demolished his brother's home. So they say that punitive housing demolitions don't happen anymore, but they clearly do. The third type is military. Now, there are many examples of military demolitions in East Jerusalem. I'll give you an example from the West Bank. In the South Hebron Hills, there's something called firing zone 972 or 971, something like this. It's a firing zone that was declared a firing zone in the 1980s. It was barely used. Happens to be that in this firing zone, there's also about 5 Palestinian villages that have been there for yonks. And these are Bedouins, again, they've been on the land for a long time. And why do they want the area as a firing zone where they can practice, where the military can practice? Because there's a lot of caves, a lot of old houses that they can learn how to do sort of urban warfare in people's villages. So the idea, and it hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it won't happen, was to demolish these 5 villages so they could have space for this firing zone, so they could put some military could practice. So when we talk about military demolitions, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it won't happen. Now I'm going to show you a map here, some key facts as well. Let's see if there's anything which I haven't told you. This is, just as a basic kind of general thing, it says here that most demolitions, about 90%, occur in already vulnerable farming and herding communities in Area C, because Area C is under full Israeli control, both military and civilian. Thousands of others remain at risk of demolition and displacement. I also think it's really important to know, I don't think any of us can imagine what it must be like to wake up in the morning and see bulldozers outside your house ready to demolish your home. I think, the trauma that the families are left with. There was actually a professor in Gaza who did research on suicide bombers, and found that over 50% of suicide bombers had their houses demolished with children. The Palestinian women, less my generation, much more the previous generation, didn't usually have careers or go out and work. The family home was the centre of their life. And as soon as you take that centre of life away, you demolish that home, the mother, the wife become very, very disorientated. Actually, ICAHD, which rebuilds houses every summer, so Beit Arabiya, which is named after Arabiya, that we built last summer, which was demolished in the beginning of January 2012. We rebuilt again, last summer after it was demolished for the 6th time. Arabiya, when her house was first demolished, she stopped speaking for a month. For the men, seeing their house demolished, seeing their lack of ability to be able to protect their family, you see very high rates of drug abuse and alcohol abuse and domestic abuse among families who've experienced housing demolitions. And for the children, it's incredibly traumatic. ICAHD, not so much now because we're just building up our network again, but very much in the past, tried to be present as much as possible in the housing demolitions themselves. If we couldn't prevent them, then at least we were there to document what was happening and to be there as some sort of support for the family. The housing demolitions, it's such a tactic Israel uses to make life very, very difficult. Again, demographics, reduce the Palestinian population, keep a Jewish majority. Great number here then, got some great key facts. 2012, more than 600 Palestinian homes and other structures were demolished. Over 600, resulting in the forced displacement of 886 Palestinians, more than half of them children. Around 4,100 people were otherwise affected in 2012, for example, due to the demolition of animal shelters, water systems or infrastructure. So we're not talking here just about the actual house being demolished, but we have examples of water systems being demolished and basic infrastructure being demolished as well, mosques being demolished. And of course, housing demolitions and forced displacement is something that happens in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and in Israel 48. You guys have heard about the Prawa plan? The Prawa plan to forcefully displace 40,000 Bedouins from the Negev. Again, the issue of demolitions, they're just going to demolish their villages and move them into Rafah, which is just outside of Beersheba. Can you hold this? I'm going to read to you a quote from the guy who was the head of Arab affairs for Jerusalem municipality back in the 1990s. So he was under Ehud Olmert when he wrote this. Now, it's from the 1990s. He talks about it in the past tense. Nothing has changed. What I'm reading to you now is exactly what's going on still today. Israel turned urban planning into a tool of the government to be used to help prevent the expansion of the city's non-Jewish population. It was a ruthless policy, if only for the fact that the needs, to say nothing of the rights, of Palestinian residents were ignored. Israel saw the adoption of strict zoning plans, green zoning, as a way of limiting the number of new homes built in Palestinian neighborhoods, and thereby ensuring that the Palestinian percentage of the city's population did not grow beyond 30%. Allowing too many new homes in Palestinian neighborhoods would mean too many Palestinian residents in the city. The idea was, and is, to move as many Jews as possible into East Jerusalem and move as many Palestinians as possible out of the city entirely. Israeli housing policy in East Jerusalem was and is all about this numbers game, and that's from 1999. Seems a while ago, but 15 years, nothing's changed. It is exactly the same policy, probably even more ruthless today than it was back then. Yeah, I think, just so you guys know, about 54% of Palestinian-owned land in East Jerusalem is designated as green zones to prevent that expansion from happening. And of course, the bulldozers, trucks, diggers, etc., that are used to demolish these homes are Caterpillar.